First of all, happy Father's Day. Second of all, I hope everybody is safe. Those of you in Israel, we've had an interesting few days here. And Charles will go into it. What happened? Why now? Was it expected? What is to be expected? And we will let you know what else is going on. Have a pleasant and safe evening.
What we will be doing today is going to go over briefly what has happened between us and the Iranians. And from my perspective, it's important to know some of the background. And then we'll take it up to exactly where we are now, try to figure out what are the interests and where there are possibilities of, call it conflict resolution. All right, for those who don't know me, I'm going to just introduce myself as Yisrael Naaman, and that I live in Israel for some 48 years and have been very involved in many things, whether it was academic or leading tours or building the community where I live. And I'm originally from New Jersey in the States, and as of late, the last year and a half, of course, after what happened with October 7th, Susan and I decided that we were wanted to really teach classes online, because we know that people do watch video clips and they hear some really good people for, a few minutes. And we figured maybe some people really would like to get involved, right, in depth, and really have an in-depth understanding, and therefore would be able to confront with an educated background, really be able to confront anybody who was taking the anti-Israel stand, or even more so, people who don't know and just are asking questions and they're not sure of what is going on. Therefore, sort of like spread the understandings, because there's far too much anti-Israel activity out there, which of course spills over to anti-Semitism that we are all familiar with. People saying they're anti-Zionist, but we know that that's not where it is. It does go to anti-Semitism. Okay, so Susan, you passing it over to me here? Okay, so we're going to start, and afterwards, questions and answers. And yes, the whole thing about the Red-Green Alliance, we'll get to it another time. The program was more or less ready, and then I realized by midday that we had to change this. So we put this together fairly quickly. The biggest problem was sifting through it to make sure it would not be too long. So here we go. All right, if you have questions, just write them down, and at the end, I'll be happy to answer everything. So when we speak about Iran and its nuclear development, we have to first go back to the Khomeini revolution. Even beforehand, there was peaceful Iranian nuclear development that was going on up until actually the end of the 80s. Now, in 79, it was the Khomeini revolution. Beforehand, you had the Pahlavis, the Shah of Iran. They were not building nuclear weapons or anything like that. The 79 Khomeini revolution, Khomeini himself was not for it. And it took Khomeini, the one who's in power now, became supreme leader in 89 when Khomeini died. I know the names sound the same, just got to listen a little carefully. In the 1990s and into the 2000s, the Iranians were building these centrifuges in secret. They got caught. And it was discovered in 2002, 2003, and they were forced to halt their development. And as a result, they didn't move it forward, especially because of the American involvement in Iraq in 2003. They were afraid that the Americans would also be involved in Iran. Plus, there was a president at the time who was moderate, even though the presidents don't have a lot of power. But apparently, everybody figured, don't aggravate the Americans. What happened? You've all heard, I'm sure, of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. He won the election in 2005. He's an extreme radical, right? Very much a jihadi to the end. And he said, you know what? We're going to start the program again. 2006, it's discovered. And the same month, July of 2006, when the Second War in Lebanon broke out, interestingly enough, that's when there was going to be this investigation going on in Iran, and there were going to be inspections, whatever, because it was understood that they were moving towards some sort, with a nuclear program. Well, eventually, going quickly here, okay, because it's just the background, Iran, there was the nuclear deal you're all familiar with, 2015, which of course Israel did not trust, because look, we know, and I think anybody who looks carefully at jihadi Islam reads the jihadis, Khomeini in particular, even though he wasn't in favor of nuclear weapons, but he was in favor of capturing the world. All right. So those who came after him, like Khamenei, like obviously, we're going to use this because it will empower our jihad, and particularly the Shiite Iranian jihad. So Israel is very suspicious, and we know 2018, the Mossad broke into this enormous warehouse and took out like 55,000 different records of activity of nuclear development. Discs included, and proves all the violations, and that's what got the Americans to leave under President Trump in his first term. 2020, the Iranians announced they're going to enrich, their nuclear material, meaning the uranium, and that's after Qasem Soleimani was taken out. We know Qasem Soleimani was the leader of the Revolutionary Guard Corps, in particular the Al-Quds Brigade, and very, very active. He's the one who designed the whole framework of the Shiites capturing the Middle East, aided the Hezbollah, the Houthis, Assad in Syria, the Shiites in Iraq. Okay, so by the 2010s, Israel was involved in sabotage operations, whether it was working against their the computer programs that ran it, right? Next, there was that infection we gave them, and there was sabotage and assassinations and whatever else. But it slows them down, and that's the whole thing. We slowed them down, and by the way, it's taken them more than 25 years. That's slowing them down, but they will get there eventually, and that is the biggest problem. Okay, and Israel, we knew that. Okay, next. So here we have, this is Ali Khamenei, who you guys are familiar with as an old man today who runs Iran. That's a picture of him in the 1980s during the war with Iraq, and he empowers himself through building the Revolutionary Guards. And he took over as a cleric for Khomeini, but he was not of that caliber at all. And it's constantly said that this clerical position has now become political and it remains jihadi, of course. This is Khomeini, who was a great Islamic scholar, extremely radical, and Ahmadinejad, who from 2005 to 2013 was president of Iran and was so radical that even Khamenei, who was considered an ally of his, had to sideline him because he was undermining the authority of the supreme leader. Okay, next. So what wasn't addressed, okay, and this is very important that everybody forgets, almost everybody, is what was not addressed in this deal, right? Any deal dealing with the Iranian that was confronting the Iranians with their nuclear program is the conventional stuff. Now, take a look. Hezbollah is a great proxy of Iran. They had full cooperation with the Iranians, and by the 1990s and into the early 2000s, and finally in 2008, they essentially captured the Lebanese state. They also were very successful in forcing Israel out of the security zone in South Lebanon. And we know 2006 war was a matter of Hezbollah taking the offensive. And it would be quiet for some 17 years until the 8th of October 2003. Right? We know that the Hezbollah joined a day later, and luckily so, they were not in the secret. Can you imagine if we were attacked also from the north? It would have been a total disaster. Now, the one who built that policy was Hassan Nasrallah with Qasem Soleimani, okay, and building up the Shiite Hezbollah force in Lebanon. The Houthis in Yemen as well, Soleimani and Nasrallah, right? They defeat the Sunnis in Yemen, and the Houthis, who are Shiites, are, of course, an Iranian proxy. The Iraqi, Hezbollah, and Shiite popular mobilization forces in the first decade of the 21st century, the 2000s, to the present, and they've taken on different names here and there. So it's not the same. You always hear the same name, but they are the ones who project Iranian influence in Iraq. And yes, they have attacked Israel at times, or certainly have threatened a lot. At the moment, they're keeping it down. Israel has threatened them back. That was yesterday, the day before. Told them, if you want to get involved in this, we'll deal with you also. Assad, Syria, held up by Hezbollah and Iran. Of course, we know that that all collapsed in December 2024. We now have an issue with the Turks in Syria. It's a whole different story. The Hamas tunnels, Sinwar, we have a picture of over here. He worked with Nasrallah, Qasem Soleimani, even though they're Sunnis, but because they were against Israel, so everybody was in this together. have the same enemy, although we know Sunnis and Shiites have killed each other plenty. And Iran developed its own rocket capabilities. They're outside the agreement. They can develop anything. So if they're cheating on the nuclear agreements and they're developing long-range rockets, which is considered, quote, kosher, that's okay. So we know that as far as Israel is concerned, this is a major, major threat, one of destruction. And this is where, where it leads up to in the first quarter of the 21st century. Okay, next. October 7th and 8th, 2023 through to June 13th, right? That's just a couple of days ago. So you had, as we recall, the Hamas slaughter and abductions of the Nukhba, October 7th. The Hezbollah Radwan were planning the same thing, but even worse, apparently. But they joined October 8th. So by then, the reserves have been called up. And we know of those attacks back and forth between Israel and the Iranians. Israel attacking Iranian, senior military leaders, actually in Damascus, and right next to the embassy, the Iranian embassy. They attacked Israel, as you remember, at the beginning of April 24. The Iranians counterattacked Israel, of course, then went after them even more so, and it was back and forth. In October of 24 is where Israel went after the leadership of Hezbollah, and of course, it also was dealing with the Iranians, attacks against their abilities to defend their nuclear sites, and Iran fired back at Israel early October, and then Israel, the 26th of October, really smashed much of the Iranian ability to defend itself, its air defenses, alongside of damages to infrastructure, and apparently some of the oil installations. Not clear exactly everything is done, because you do get conflicting reports. However, the Iranians continued. The Iranians continued to accelerate their nuclear enrichment, despite the fact that they were now going into negotiations with the United States, the new Trump administration, and now we move it up to where we are now. They're negotiating, and the Americans are constantly being warned by Israel that every single day they're getting closer to nuclear weapons, and they'll negotiate forever. They know how to do it. This is the Middle East. Trump gave them 2 months, 60 days. He said after that he held Bibi and the government, right, Israel's government. By the way, the opposition and the coalition are all of the same opinion. There isn't an opposition here to taking out Iran. Okay, that has to be made very clear. There's a total consensus, by the way. There are even those much further to the left than Bibi, who have said months ago that something has to be done about Iran. Where they disagree is how to handle the Palestinians. In any case, on the 61st day, so that's when Israel decided had to strike and a preventive attack, because otherwise, as soon as they got one a nuclear weapon, they say that with the material they have, very quickly be able to make something like 10. And we know that even if Israel takes out the usual 90-some-odd% of rockets coming in, hey, you miss one nuclear weapon fired at Tel Aviv, that's the end of the country. Okay, so that will also be taken into consideration. That there's this thought, many people look at it and say, well, Israel, is really strong. We take out 90% of this, that, and the other, or 95% even. Wait a minute, but if it's a nuclear weapon, also if you take it out overhead, right? It's not like you can have debris land on your roof. It will also destroy you. So there was no choice. Okay, and that has been made very, very clear. There was no choice. Because, people say, oh, Israel should have waited. Man, I read some of the stuff by those, writing abroad. It's interesting. Especially the Europeans. I was just reading an article 2 minutes before we got on about how much that the European countries, led by Britain, France, and Germany, have said, listen, you know what? When it comes to Iran, we're with the Israelis. Because they're under threat, and they have a lot of Iranians living in those countries who, hate the regime and, demand regime change. They say it's internal, as well as, yes, they're threatened if they have missiles that can be fired 2,000 kilometers, if not more. They already reach into Europe, well past Israel. Okay, so here we have the Middle East overview. Just give everyone a visual on this. What was Israel facing? And we have to look at Israel's facing many, many fronts. Israel's facing many fronts. You have Israel here. This is Gaza. We had Lebanon. Hezbollah has been knocked out. Whatever will happen with them, we don't know. We'll talk about that in a second. Yemen down here at the bottom. Iraq, right? You have your Sunnis, your Shiites, I'm sorry, over here. Syria has now flipped, but that they're pro-Turkish, which isn't necessarily good for Israel. And of course, Iran over here. And the big money, as we all know, is from Qatar. Never, never forget them. And those countries that are with Israel, right, where they're more quietly so, like Saudi Arabia and Jordan, Egypt, which is now blocked. There was a group coming from Europe over land that was going to bring aid to Gaza, whatever else. They stopped them. And of course, the United Arab Emirates, that their diplomats have made it very clear that there is no way that you can trust these jihadi types. Best thing to do is basically they have to be eliminated. And they themselves, but I'd say really one of the few Arab countries you could say really are reformist. Like Islam is fine, provided you don't, no jihad. There's a pluralistic world. Okay. Go for the next one. So what are Israel's objectives since October 7th? And this is where Iran comes in. It's rather significant. All right. First of all, Hamas, destroy and return the hostages. I want to make it very clear. That is not a political objective. It's a military objective. It's a strategy. But strategy is supposed to lead to an overall objective. And there is no day after strategic planning. And that's one of our biggest problems. And one of the reasons that we're constantly at clash with the Europeans, as well as members of the Democratic Party in the United States. As for the Republicans, and we know that there are those who are more isolationist, I don't think it really plays into their thinking. They simply don't want to be involved in, quote, foreign wars, not supporting Ukraine and not supporting Israel. And by the way, it seems to many people in Israel, certainly to myself, that this is a very serious issue. That wing of the Republican Party, led by Tucker Carlson and a few others. Okay, so I'm putting that out there because I think we have to realize it's not a matter of what political parties on your side. It's a matter of how they view interests of their country. Do those interests overlap with the interests of a successful Jewish state that is not destroyed? Okay, so Hezbollah, seriously damaged by Israel, and Israel has enabled the Lebanese state, along with US, France, the EU, the moderate Arab states, and others, to curtail Hezbollah. And that's very, very significant. Okay. But Israel's not doing it herself. Israel's having others, right, will now implement that policy. Now, there's a question, could Israel really get involved that way? Anytime we mention, even whisper something about peace with Lebanon, we find that the Lebanese government, although it's led by, a Christian, a moderate Joseph Ayoun, that no, because he's afraid of the internal framework of Lebanon. So whether we keep it quiet or not, sort of the same. Others are going to have to rebuild Lebanese state. It's always been that way. As for the Houthis in Yemen, they were seriously damaged. Israeli attacks, British, American, whatever, but they keep firing rockets at Israel, and it has not let up here and there. We call it a tiftuf, like drizzling in. But it's very disruptive, very, very disruptive. And the Bab el-Mandeb is still blocked, right? That narrow straits between the area of Somalia, Djibouti, and Yemen still blocked. The Americans, right, we go down here, bottom, the Americans, it's down here, okay? The Americans have said that they will, they came to an agreement with the Houthis, and, they want to attack American ships, and America won't get involved. It'll be interesting to see if the Europeans and others will start doing something about it, because they're losing, as are the Egyptians. The Egyptians, I think, are losing $7 billion annually because of lost revenue through usage of non-usage of the Suez Canal. If we look at Syria, the regime was overthrown, and there's no clear policy how to handle that. So when we talk about Israel and policy objectives, basically, we're leaving it to others. The one where we could have direct effect would be with the Palestinians, because of the issues internally in Israel, theology, ideology, greater land of Israel, as well as should the Palestinians have a state, yes or no, even if it would be under, quote, moderates, can you trust them? Talking about Palestinian Authority in Ramallah. So there's no declared policy, which makes it a bit problematic. Plus, reserves have been called up. Some guys have done 400 days, even close to 500 days of reserve duty. Okay, so we should know there's a lot of pressure, and percentages of those showing up for the reserves has been going down because families are falling apart, businesses are going bankrupt, and it's become a tremendous drain. Something I don't know how much it's reported abroad. Okay, next. So the clash with Iran, and that's what we were here for, but I wanted to put it all into perspective. First of all, the Iranian air defenses were destroyed. They were partially eliminated previously. April of 24, certainly October of 24, and then in the recent attacks that began the night of Thursday, Friday, the 12th, 13th of June, that the military command structure, much of it was wiped out. The chief of staff, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, as well as many others. Just on TV now, just an hour or so ago, we took out the head of the intelligence. So they're really like walking around headless on a lot of these things. Yes, the deputy comes up, but often the deputy was killed in the same attack or shortly afterwards. So you have this knowledge or this familiarity with, their military and their security forces, but those at the top are gone. So whoever you bring up is much less qualified. Plus, there's a fear factor. It has really become more and more frightening. And they were just showing on TV the bazaris. Bazaris are those who work, in the shuk, the market, known as the bazaar in Tehran, that they don't believe the government, and they are able to get Israel radio, the government station in Persian. And when we say certain things, so they trust it much more. And something was put out about, there are going to be attacks, this, that, the other. Everybody packs up and runs home. So there is the issue of undermining the regime. Now, there have been attacks on nuclear facilities, in particular Natanz, Efsahan, and the question was at Fordo. And we're denying Fordo, and then some are saying it really happened. Problem there is that there can be a nuclear radiation, radioactive leakage. And now there's this going back and forth. There is, there isn't, there is, there isn't. And if there is, it's maybe contained within the facility itself. It hasn't escaped, because obviously Israel doesn't want, something like that to happen. Military facilities are hit. We're talking here, whatever small air force. They don't have much of one, the Iranians, but also their training grounds and whatnot, taking out whatever abilities they have. The immediate objective is to force compliance with the American demands in the nuclear talks. In other words, Israel, somebody put it out there as like, we're the guard dog or we're the bulldog. They send out to bark and bite, whatever else. And then, the guy who owns the dog says, all right, now we're going to discuss things. We're going to negotiate. I don't like the comparison, but I imagine there may be something to it. Israel is sent out to clobber the Iranians, and then the Americans can get a deal, which of course would benefit Israel also. That's the idea. However, there's something that stands well behind this, and that is we really need regime change. We need the regime overthrown. Let me just point out the map here for a second. You have where you see all the different sites in Iran, and there are many more. I think there are 40 altogether. Some of them are quite minor. So it's a big operation, not like when Israel took out the Osirak site in Iraq in 1981, right, Menachem Begin, or with Syria right on the border with Turkey in September of 2007. And it was only half built, wasn't about to go online or something like that, but sent the message to Assad, this isn't happening. The long-term objective, and I can't emphasize enough, is to encourage a popular uprising. Now, there are two ways that it can happen. One, the people take to the streets because they've had it. But they only take to the streets if the economic situation will get bad enough. And that means that they can't go to work, and there's no fuel, or very little, for your vehicles to run air conditioning for those who have, and factory work. Like everything grinds to a halt. So the thinking is that to do it. But we have to be careful. There's also export of oil to China. 15% of China's imports are from Iran. I don't think we want to end up in a clash with them. So my looking at it is we may go after, and apparently we have, the domestic fuel resources, but we'll probably leave whatever goes to China unless it can be replaced by someone else like the Saudis. All right. So that's the longer term objective. And that really is an objective. Okay. Whereas if we talk about the immediate one, it's more of what we call a Sidur, an arrangement with the Americans, but leaving the Ayatollahs in power, which means that there can there can be a restart at some point, because jihad as a theology always has restarts, right? You stop for a hudna, Islamic ceasefire, and then you start again when it's on your terms. Okay, next.
So I just wanted to give you an update. This is a free lecture series coming from the Naaman Academy, which offers online courses and resource material that is available on the Naaman Academy. You'll see a QR code on one of the screens that you can take, or the information is available in the email that you got when you got the link to this webinar. So we have 2 courses coming up. We have a 3rd round of Exposing Islamic Jihad, which has run 2 sessions. We ran a 24 class session and a 12 class course, and we're running again the 12er because the 24 was a little bit much for people to get their heads around, so we condensed it a little bit, and that will be starting next week or at the end of this week. Okay, and because of the situation, we've left the early bird price on, so anybody wants to take advantage of that. So sign up as soon as possible so you can get the early bird cost. There's also still payments if you'd rather pay in payments. And this is a very important course to understand where the Islamic Jihad is coming from, what's objectives, what they've done in the past, and the doublespeak that's involved with it, so that not necessarily what you're hearing is what is being meant. And of course, we're confused with TikTok and other social media, and we get every day, we get somebody telling us that we're speaking nonsense. Of course, Islam is a peaceful religion, and that jihad means struggle of the soul, and that we don't know what we're talking about. And Yisrael's not an Islamic scholar, so how could he possibly talk about this? But we look at what happens on the ground and what the results are, and not necessarily the theological. In Hebrew, we say pilpul. That course will be starting the end of the week. I see almost everybody here has taken it. Okay, so I'm speaking to the choir here.
No, there are new people. There are some people here who are new.
Almost everybody here. Okay, and if you haven't, you know who you are, and highly recommend it. I can ask anyone here, and they will let you know. And the other course a new course is starting the end of the month, and it's a quick summer mini course on anti-Semitism. And okay, so we have 15 minutes here, guys. And we will have courses on anti-Semitism. And a lot of people say, why should I study about anti-Semitism? And in the course, you'll find the answer to it is because it's not just about Jews. Anybody who is taking a minority and we heard, yeah, coming to warn us. Taking a minority and pinning all of the evils of society on them as a scapegoat. So we'll move on to the next scapegoat as soon as that plan is implemented. So the quick course, 6 classes going from Pharaoh to Facebook, and that will be starting at the end of the month. So anybody who's finished already with the first course can move on to the second. Okay, so